With the pre-draft process comes rumors, and with rumors come maybe some thoughts about Sam Darnold. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day every single day. I appreciate y'all so very much. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Terms and conditions apply. Today on the show, first off, we got to address a little rumor that came out of the Senior Bowl. It's nothing major, but Sam Darnold's situation continues to progress with what the Vikings want to do. We'll get to that, but I'm actually going to spend most of the show talking about a very specific matchup that is going to be very key to the NFC North moving forward, and it's Ben Johnson and Brian Flores. I have found myself fascinated with that matchup schematically. And it's not just like a masochistic thing because the Vikings have lost 5 in a row to the Lions. It's a very intriguing question from an X's and O's standpoint, right? These two very hot schemes, the way that they interact with each other, and also just learning Ben Johnson's scheme a little bit more than I have in the past is just a good thing for me as an analyst, right? Especially because now the Vikings are still going to be playing him twice a year. A lot of what he can do will change because he's going from the talent of the Lions roster to the talent of the Bears roster. That's different. And it's, different levels of quality, but also different people with different skill sets. They don't have a Jameson Williams, right? That for the good and the bad of that. Fascinating stuff. And because the Vikings are going to play him twice a year, I'm embarking on a little bit more of a project to get to know what that's doing. So it's going to be like the lion's share of the show, but I'll get to what we got to so that's going to be the lion's share of the show, but we'll get to what I teased at the beginning first, which is a Jeremy Fowler report that came out over the weekend from the Senior Bowl. So here is the way that this usually comes out. You're going to get a little bit of rumor and conjecture from the Senior Bowl about all kinds of free agency situations, trade situations, contract situations, anything where a team needs to talk to a player. You're going to hear a little bit about it from the Senior Bowl. All the agents are there, trying to get connected with the upcoming class of college players, but they're also there in the same room as the GMs, and people get to talking about stuff that maybe they even shouldn't be talking about, right? The Combine, I think, is I call it TamperCon because really like the underwear Olympics of it, a lot of teams have better versions of that same data with like GPS tracking data and stuff. So like that part of it is, outside of the desire to just get there in person and watch them, do run cones and do drills and watch how they backpedal and stuff is one thing, but it's a lot of the value of that event is the conversations and this sort of unofficial preview to how free agency is going to go, where you get to ask questions like, hey, who's interested in Kirk Cousins? How do we get to know who is interested in Kirk Cousins and what they maybe would think about offering Kirk Cousins so that we can make a decision about what we're going to do? And a lot of that happened at the Combine last year with Atlanta. Very famously was maybe a little early, but nothing too crazy happened there. But that is why we're hearing this now. But the report from Jeremy Fowler is hilariously inconclusive. It's like they don't really know what they're going to do still. They thought they knew what they were going to do, and they did. They went into this season. The Vikings went into the season thinking Sam Darnold was going to do a year. We were going to limp through however that went, and he was going to walk. That was like the status quo, and that J.J. McCarthy, before he was hurt, it was J.J. McCarthy's going to take over at some point. And then he got hurt, and it was like, okay, well, then he'll be the guy for 2025, and this is the Sam Darnold year. But there was never much of an expectation of Sam Darnold being the quarterback beyond 2024 for the Minnesota Vikings. You got to understand that until like Thanksgiving, maybe even later than that, the Vikings had no intention. And that's not me, like that's pretty publicly known, I think, at this point. I don't think I'm blowing up anybody's spot. But then they won a bunch of games. He played a bunch of really good ones. He set a bunch of career highs. He played like a completely different quarterback than we had ever seen. And the Vikings went, okay, maybe we should reconsider this, right? They didn't do anything that committed them to letting him walk. There's no rule that said they had to stick with their plan from September, from August. And now they're rethinking it. And apparently, as of the Senior Bowl, which it's early in the process, they still got like 2 months to figure this out. But as of this juncture, they haven't made that decision yet. They don't know. Some options are on the table. We've talked about them in the past. Franchise tag, transition tag. The transition tag would be about 35 mil. Franchise tag would be like 41. So the franchise tag, completely exclusive, nothing. There's the non-exclusive franchise tag, which is the same as the franchise tag, but other teams can negotiate with you. And if they negotiate Sam Darnold away, you get 2 first-round picks. And then there's the transition tag, which is the same thing, but without the 2 first-round picks. That's the cheapest one. So you basically, if you do transition tag Sam Darnold, it works like a franchise tag, fully guaranteed, 35 mil for 2025. One more year of him. JJ McCarthy gets a true rookie year, and that's going to be the plan. Okay. Or, a true developmental year where he's not expected to start week 1, blah, blah, blah. And then there's a window where other teams can talk to Sam Darnold. Somebody gives Sam Darnold 45 mil, and he's like, yeah, I'll take that. The Vikings get right of refusal. They get to match. And if they decline to match, all right, so long, thanks. You don't get a comp pick if you do all that stuff, by the way. You get nothing. He just walks. He goes and makes more money elsewhere, and you go, okay, we're going with JJ McCarthy. If you get stuck with it, if nobody does out-offer him, okay, you're now paying 35 mil for Sam Darnold, and that's the plan for 2025. Sounds like they haven't really made that choice yet. And there's no reason they have to have made that choice right now. They've got a lot of time to think about it, to go scour all over the tape, to go talk to people, to talk to their coaches, to go, refigure, to wait and see who's still going to be on staff. That's a big one, right? Grant Udinski, I think he's taken 5 OC interviews at this point. If he leaves, you might have a different opinion. Or it might just be that this conversation happens in a room without his voice in it. And I don't know which decision he would be caping for, but it's different. Now, that voice won't be caping for that option, and that might change the dynamic of that conversation in that meeting room, right? All those little things still happen, not to mention the front office is focused on potentially extending Cam Bynum or Byron Murphy, or they're focused on pro scouting, figuring out free agency, figuring out all their other cap stuff. And of course, with the Vikings looking at 50, 60 some odd million, depending on which cap website and how you count like void years and stuff, they're going to have probably 55-ish million in effective space to spend, not including like the rookie class and all that stuff. Like after you factor all that stuff away, you'll have a budget of 55 million to spend in free agency. You're going to spend 35 of that 55 on Sam Darnold when you have JJ McCarthy and you're excited about him. What are you going to do? We've talked about all that ad nauseum, but I guess I'm not surprised to hear that as of not even the Super Bowl, the Vikings haven't immediately made that decision. You could also say maybe it implies if they're still thinking about that, maybe they're not as excited about Daniel Jones as the next guy, but I don't think that I would go there. I'm sure people are going to go there because they always try to take that next leap where they go, well, if they like one guy, that means they must not like another. I've been hearing that for years and years doing this. And it's probably not, it's just that you're going to consider Sam Darnold before you even think about considering Daniel Jones. Of course, Sam Darnold is going to be the first option. And you're going to go, well, how do we feel about that? And then if you don't feel that, okay, now we begin the conversation about Daniel Jones, but you're not even going to be thinking about him before that. So all of that is to say we still don't know anything. It's a whole bunch of nothing. And I'm not going to spend 30 minutes trying to drone on to you about nothing. about report. Nothing has changed. It feels like I'm covering the gosh darn Justin Jefferson thing again. Report. Everything is the same as it was. So instead, let's talk about something that has changed, which is the dynamics of the NFC North from a coaching perspective, how Ben Johnson's offense will change in a series that we might, because I'm not going to be able to get to all of this in one show. So it's going to be a series called Beating Ben. That's going to be up next. Today's Locked On Vikings episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. You are always thinking about your business and what you need to do, how to optimize this or that, the best decisions to make. And that means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. And that's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your whole network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. They have a new feature that can help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insight. And here's a pro tip, add the #hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. It's no wonder that 72% of small businesses say that LinkedIn helps them find high quality hires. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Moving right along here with the Locked On Vikings podcast. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. When you're done here, you can go check out patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL, where I already have one draft video out, and I'm going to put them out slowly at first, but it'll ramp up, especially as we get closer to draft time, as well as free agent breakdowns whenever the Vikings sign somebody and so on. Let's move on to the main topic of the show, which is going to be beating Ben. This has got to be a series. I don't know how long it's going to take, but the points I want to make, I don't want to sacrifice any detail, and I don't want to rush it. So we're going to spend time on this. We got time to spend. It's the offseason. But here's the goal. I want to answer 2 questions, burning questions that I had that I couldn't really find a satisfactory answer by reading someone else's article. So I went for it myself. Those 2 questions are, 1, how is Ben Johnson's offense going to change going from Detroit to Chicago? And in particular, how is it going to change how you have to defend it? That's the Vikings angle of this, right? And 2, can Brian Flores finally get the better of this guy somehow? Because this has not been the case. Here's a stat. The Vikings have given up 30 or more points 7 times since Brian Flores has become the defensive coordinator. And by the way, they've all been exactly 30 or 30. I think 34 was the worst. And I think that was the Jaron Hall disaster game last year, if I recall. No, I'm sorry. It was the week 2 against the Eagles. That includes defensive touchdowns and stuff too. But the Vikings have given up 30 or more 7 times. 4 of them have been against the Detroit Lions. And the Lions have never scored less than 30 on the Vikings. That is such an astounding outlier to a defense that has been so good otherwise. So what is the secret sauce, right? What is it that Ben Johnson has that beats Brian Flores, and how do you fix it, right? So those are the main 2 questions. What changes in Chicago, and what can they do about this guy? And to start with that, you got to start with the run game. It always starts with the run game and then works out from there. I think that's always the easiest way to try to understand something. The run game will tell you about formations. It will tell you about spacing. It will tell you so much. And so to do that, I have a handy-dandy resource, which is the 2022 Detroit Lions offensive manual written by Bobby Peters. He does all kinds of these manual things. He has one for the 2021 Rams if you want to learn about Kevin O'Connell, the offense that he came from. And a lot of what I've talked about here comes from books like this. So thank you to Bobby. Go buy one. It's not an ad. I just support it. But that's from a couple years ago, mind you, but it's very much, this is philosophical, and the kinds of things that offenses change from year to year do not render this book dated until a guy like Ben Johnson leaves and they have to go do something else, which who knows what's going to happen in Detroit now without a lot of the brain trust of their offensive staff. Also a fascinating question, probably one more for Locked On Lions, and I don't want to become Locked On Lions here. I want to stay at this from the defensive perspective. So let's talk about spacing. When the Lions run the ball, they have 2 staples that they love, that they love to play off of each other, and it's counter and outside zone. If you play a lot of Madden, you probably know what I'm talking about, and that probably immediately tracks for you. But in counter or any gap run, powers and traps and anything that has a puller, typically has a puller, you usually are blocking down. That means if this run is to the left, your linemen are blocking to the right. And in zone, it's the opposite. If the run is to the left, your linemen are blocking to the left. So if you are a defense and you are looking at a lineman and he's not pulling, so it's a center, let's say, rarely pulls. Not never, but rarely. But if you're looking at the center and he goes to the right, that doesn't give you the information you need to suss out if it's zone or counter, which is why those two play well against each other. Is he trying to reach block me? Is he trying to down block me? What's he trying to do is a harder read than just being able to see a step to the strong side or the weak side and immediately suss out the run. That is also difficult to teach and difficult to execute. And this is the drawback of what the Lions do, and they have the talent to pull it off, so they haven't felt this drawback, and it's made them really good at it, is that it's really hard to have a lineman be both a gap guy and a zone guy. Everybody runs some of both, but for the Vikings, for example, counter is a changeup. We sprinkle it in every once in a while. We're going to call it a couple times a game just to keep the defense on their toes. For the Lions, it's an identity to do both, to line up on a given play and not know if you're going to get zone or counter. You play against the Vikings, you know you're probably getting zone, maybe duo. But against the Lions, you get a lot. And that versatility makes them really hard to defend, right? But it goes beyond that. So when you are running counter, let's start with counter. When you're running counter, the way that you defend counter, there's two main options. I'm going to sort all run fits into two buckets. Defensive coaches are going to get furious at me. I'm not worried about that. But box and spill, right? Box and spill. I did not get every category there, but just let's keep it simple for now. So if you are going to box fit, that means your edge rushers are going to play out to the outside. They're going to play contain basically. They don't want that run to bounce to the outside. You want to funnel everything back into the meat grinder, the big boys on the interior, and hope one of those guys makes the tackle, and then try to fit up every gap from there. Spill is a different philosophy where you want it to bounce outside because that takes longer. Because east-west is a longer path than north-south, and you want to essentially force the offense into east-west. You want to get Jahmyr Gibbs trying to bounce everything out to the sideline, and if he's going to race somebody to the sideline, that means that he's in a speed contest with Byron Murphy and not a speed contest with Harrison Phillips. We want to usher things into that matchup instead, right? Those are the two main ideas. So if you are box fitting against counter, typically thought of as a sort of a mismatch, a sort of, counter is rock and box fits are scissors. It's kind of what counter wants to. It doesn't mean it's impossible. That doesn't mean that if you get caught in box fits against a counter team, you can't win that rep. You got to win the some of your reps, right? And it's the angles are a little better for the offense, so people don't like to be caught in it. But the reason for that is if you are playing a contained thing, counter runs do want to go up the middle. They are just changing what the middle is. They're going off the tackle, but they're going between the tackle and a pulling guard. So they're just changing who's in the middle and swapping stuff around to make the angles better. The nice thing about counter is that if you're not the puller, it's the easiest block you have in your arsenal. A down block is the easiest one. Think about it. If I'm a lineman and the run is going left and my job is to block the guy to my right, I'm already on the right side of him. I'm already on the side of him I need to be. And he needs to come through me to make the play. I can just stand here and be in his way. I don't actually have to move him at all. In the NFL, you probably want to move some space, and they like to keep things a lot tighter, so you do have to move him a little bit. But it's the easiest block there is. It's easier than zone blocking. It's easier than like a true scoop block. It's easier than climbing up to a linebacker. All you do is take 145-degree step and go be a mauler. It's the simplest job. Maybe I should say simplest, not easiest, because it does require a little bit of muscle in a way that zone doesn't necessarily. And you're probably getting a tackle instead of a linebacker. So I shouldn't say easiest, but that's the upside. The downside is the puller has to be a very good player. That guy's got to move. And pulling is one of the harder jobs, at least in my opinion. The footwork needs to be very precise. You need to be both fast and strong and in a lot of control of a 300-plus pound body to get to the right place. And sometimes you got to hit a shifty little safety. Maybe you're going to kill him if he doesn't duck you, but that can be really difficult. It's a complicated thing to run, but the Lions love to run it, and they're very, very good at it because every one of their offensive linemen is good. So they can get away with doing this, and they can get away with outside zone. One of the things the Lions love to do when they're in counter, this is straight out of the Bobby Peters book, okay? I cannot take credit for this observation, but one of the things that they love to do is to take a wide receiver on the play side and bluff the defensive end, or put him into a tight condensed split and essentially have tight end on one side and then Amon-Ra St. Brown on the other. And what that does is if you're, say, Van Ginkel and you're on the weak side, you are going to have to widen out to be able to still get around that wide receiver because you don't want to run through him. You want to get around him so you can still be fast with your pass rusher or whatever. You don't want to bump that guy. It's going to screw up your timing. Might screw up his too, and maybe you want that, but it's going to widen you out. And once you are widened out, that means that you're going to be that much slower to get to the gap, and that means that the puller, the big 300-pound guy who has to be fast, suddenly has more time to do his job. So the angles of it and the spacing of it make it so that everyone's job is a little easier. That's going to be a lot of the philosophy here. Part of the philosophy is just in the diversity, which is why this needs to be a series and not an episode. But the kicker, the sort of secret ingredient in all of this is every little bit of this is designed to make someone's life easier. And even if you're a good player, guess what? If you're Kevin Zeitler and you get easy jobs all day long, you are going to have a fantastic season. You're never going to have a problem. And Ben Johnson did a great job of making it so that everybody had a job that they very much could pull off very consistently. And it made him a great run team. Well, I have a couple other counter things that I want to get into. Maybe we'll get to outside zone stuff too. Just know that those are the staples. If we don't get to all that, we'll do other episodes and stuff. But for now, let's keep talking about counter and whatever else we get to. That'll be next. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by PrizePicks. The big game is almost here, and there is no better way to make it even more exciting than with PrizePicks, which is the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings awarded, PrizePicks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. All you got to do is pick more than or less than against the PrizePicks projection. It's you versus the house. So that means that you don't have to choose a bunch of players against, competition and like sharps and like guys that know like everybody else, right? It's just you versus PrizePicks. This week, they have a special where if Patrick Mahomes gets one passing yard, you win that square. So add that up your odds. You can just combine that with, say, a Saquon Barkley getting one touchdown, rushing or receiving. If that happens, and then of course, assuming Patrick Mahomes gets a passing yard, feeling pretty safe about that one. But if all those things happen, 2.5 times your money. I'm all in on that one. But if you want to find all those other things, you can also check the promo tab to tail any of the super sweet Millie winners in big game lineups. If you tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of $1 million in promo funds. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. This episode is also brought to you by Gametime. If you're looking for tickets to a big event, like maybe you live in New Orleans and you're thinking about Super Bowl tickets, you should go check it out on Gametime. You click on your event, whatever it is, and it's going to show you super deals. They're highlighted. You can't miss them. It's going to be the best deal you can finally get. You can find. And they've actually got a guarantee about that. If you find a better deal somewhere else, they'll refund 110% of the difference. Plus, your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation options if something comes up, and the best customer service policy in the ticketing industry. I can vouch for that. I have personally dealt with their customer service. I had a problem. I had my refund before the event was over, and I still was able to get into the event, and there like no problem within like a few minutes. It was amazing. So if you're ready to make your next event even better, download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Moving on here with the Locked On Vikings podcast. Okay, to counter stuff. So one of the things the Vikings like to do defensively a lot, and a lot of teams are like this, but the Vikings love to do, you can visualize it. They love to spin their safeties. That means that they have, 2 high safeties, and they're going to, right at the snap count, they're going to shift down until one's right in the box, ready to blitz or whatever, and one is playing single high, and then it's like cover 3. Or they'll do that and then spin back into cover 2, right? They do all kinds of insane stuff. It makes everybody ooh and ah about, how cool their pre-snap disguises are. But a lot of those pre-snap disguises are playing with the safeties. I'm actually going to go back for this to Kirk Cousins. In 2021, he did a summit over Zoom because it was like deep COVID. It was like March of 2021. Everybody was still kind of not really like throwing events. So it was over Zoom with Charles Davis, where he spoke about his pre-snap process. And he said, Everything starts with the safeties. For him, he would, figure out the protections, look at the fronts and everything, and then he would spend the rest of the play looking at the safety structure. Middle of field open or middle of field closed. That is like asking, that's like kingdom in taxonomy. It's the first question. Middle of field open, middle of field closed. If the middle of field's open, the read is going to be different than if it's middle of field closed on most plays. And it's going to even be different for the receivers too. So screwing with that can screw the whole read. And if you give a quarterback a pre-snap look that's middle of field open, especially if it's a young quarterback that can't quite process it super quick, if it's Will Levis and he's in his second year and he's a deer in headlights, and he has to process and read in the blink of an eye, he's going to use pre-snap information to try to get a head start. So if you give him bad pre-snap information, you can force him to restart his process, and he's going to just get caught buffering and take a sack, right? Not to mention that Titans O-line was bad. Lots of problems over there. But that's the idea, right? Not to mention the way that it can screw with run IDs and, everybody's communication gets a little different when an extra guy gets added right in front of your face, right? So you can do all kinds of stuff. The Lions offense, for a couple of reasons, is really good against this. And I think that the idea of punishing the spinning safeties is coming up constantly as I continue to work through this project. Constantly. It is actually like a really big weakness that the Vikings get caught all the time spinning away from the weak side. So here's what they like to do. They love to take a strong side safety and put him in the box, right? This was Harrison Smith for years and years with Zimmer. And when you have Harrison Smith, you love to put a strong safety in the box, right? It's just how you do. This has been Metellus a lot now too, right? But they love to take that guy and start him somewhere and then move him somewhere else, right? And a lot of times that somewhere is either one high, or they will start with the safety maybe bluffing the weak side, and then they'll back him off into too high. But either way, they have a tendency to have a weak side player. The weak side gets weaker and the strong side gets stronger at the cadence of the snap. They do this for very good reasons because runs like to go to the strong side. It increases their coverage numbers over to where there's a tight end. There's all kinds of reasons to do that. But the Lions love to attack that by running counter to the weak side. Again, the philosophy of counter is a numbers game. You've got the center in the middle. You got a guard and tackle and a guard and tackle on either side, right? If you take one of those guards and move him to the other side, right, you now have 4 blockers where it used to be 3 to that side. And you now have a numbers advantage. Someone's got to scrape over and come with, or jump through the gap, or there's all kinds of other ways to do it. If you are trying to spill, right? Remember spill fits. If you're trying to spill versus counter, you're trying to get that gap back with time. And all you got to do is buy time. So keep that fastest path plugged up and, get underneath the puller, stay in the middle, get that guy to run around. And during all that time, the safety can come in and kind of become that extra guy. And now you've got, the numbers that you need again in the run game. But if that safety was on the line of scrimmage and is going backwards at the snap, he's going to take that much longer to get involved, and it becomes a lot harder for everybody to hold up in their plug. And by the way, a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs is kind of fast, so he's going to be able to punish that if the answer is, well, shoot, we just need a little more time now. Well, their guy is Sonic. That's not going to work. And that killed the Vikings. Those counter weeks in particular against the rotation of the safety killed the Vikings. So what's the solution for that? I think it's an interesting one. And whether it applies in Chicago or not is so interesting because the other thing is Jared Goff doesn't need pre-snap information to read out a play. In fact, sometimes he does better without it because it doesn't cloud the picture. You turn around, you get a much clearer picture. If you turn your head around for play action, by the time Dan Orlovsky made a great point about this previewing one of the Vikings-Lions game. If you turn your head around to do a play action fake, you're not looking at the defense, right? By the time you get turned around, you're reading again. All of that disguise crap has played out, and the coverage has declared into a very clear picture. It will be cover 2, cover 4, whatever. You will be able to see it clear as day. The second you snap your head back around, all that stuff will be over. So he doesn't. So that's where Jared Goff is most comfortable. Just looking at a post-snap picture and not worrying about any of the pre-snap crap. So your disguises don't help, and guys are out of position doing the disguise. So against the Lions, you might want to play things a little bit more straight up. And to do that, you probably have to get really aggressive about what you're actually doing. The thing is, in Chicago, I don't know if you say the same thing about Caleb Williams. I don't think you can say the same thing even remotely about the Bears' run game. We'll see what kind of pieces they can add to it, but you got to see it all come together anyways. So if this remains an issue in Chicago, will be really interesting to me because it'll tell me, was this like a schematic thing? Everybody can turn around and read cover 2 right away and go attack middle of field open coverages. Or was this a luxury that was afforded to them only because they had a great O-line and a veteran quarterback that knew what he was looking at in Jared Goff, that's playing out of his skull, and like all these, and then like a running back that's fast enough to get the edge on counter versus Spill Fitz if you just make the safety hesitate a little bit because he's going backwards at the snap. Like all of those things, they had the guys to punish it, and they had the scheme in place to allow the guys to punish it. But when we go to Chicago, that's not true anymore. They do not have Jahmyr Gibbs. They don't have close to the line that the Lions have, and Caleb Williams ain't Jared Goff. He's a totally different player with different skills. And so the question, of course, around Chicago will be, what do they do, right? Will this become a totally different offense, and this whole project becomes a moot point? But if that's the case, then they probably stay doing what they're doing in Detroit, even without Ben Johnson. And so this whole project still maintains its value. This could define 4 games of the Vikings season, a quarter of the Vikings season almost. So it's still worth it to me. But that's my thing, is you rethink the pre-snap disguises to keep your players in better positions against specifically counter week. And I only mean this for the 2 Lions games a year. And I guess maybe a third if we're going to get spicy about it. Only for those games. Everything else, don't screw with it. You're doing great against, young quarterbacks. You're going to make everybody freak out. Love it. But against the Lions, rotate your safeties differently. That is the suggestion, I guess, that's coming out of this. If I were a part of the Vikings defensive staff and they asked me to come up with a presentation for how to fix their Lions problem, I would come up with, let's rethink the way that we rotate safeties. I didn't even get to outside zone, not to mention the trap that they do, and I didn't even touch the passing game. There's so much more to talk about. Beating Ben. It's going to be a series on this whole offseason on Locked On Vikings. Got a couple of guests later in the week, too, about draft stuff. Lots of exciting things. Can't wait to talk to you about it. I will see you all for that, and as always, Skull.